Yo my people, it's Rayan. Today I'm going to go over 3 foundational principles for a killer landing page. By the end of this video, you'll know the 3 principles that determine whether a landing page converts traffic or loses it. I am going to show you sections from real pages and break down why each of them wins. This isn't just a checklist of 47 things to fix, it is 3 core principles that when you implement, you will see results straight away. I have sections of 2 live pages on my screen today and I'm going to break them down live and show you what I mean rather than just talk about it. Most people treat a low converting page as a design problem, a copy problem. They rewrite the headline, change the button color, add more testimonials, but then what ends up happening is there's not much difference. Maybe a 2 to 3%, maximum 5% increase, but no real meaningful improvements. The real issue is almost never the page in isolation, it is that the page is operating in a vacuum. It has been built as if the visitor arrived cold with no prior context. So the page tries to do everything at once, create awareness, build trust, handle objections and close. That's too much for one page to do at one time and it will always fail. A landing page has one job: pick up where the pre-sale left off and make the yes obvious. The 3 principles I'm about to show you are all built around this single idea. If you get this right, you can have the same traffic, the same ad spend, but your conversions will increase. The first aspect I like to look at is congruence. How uniform is the approach from your first piece of content to your landing page to closing and all the steps in between? Does it all fall in line, or is it jump? So they're here, 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 or is it all line and uniform, making it easy and simple and you can follow the path simply? The page must echo the promise that sent the client there or the customer. Whatever your ad or advertorial promised, your headline must reflect it immediately. If there's a gap between what they clicked and what they landed on, you lose them within the first 7 seconds. That's as simple as that. So getting into it, if your ad said it, they need to see it straight away. So for example, this is just my website. I'm just going to use it as an example. As soon as you click on it, creative strategist, that's what I do. And then one operator, the whole machine. The client already knows getting into what I'm about and who I am before they've even needed to look at the page. This is at the top where your eyes go, bam. The visitor arrives with a specific frame in their head. The page either confirms that frame or shatters it. There's no middle ground. Even subtle mismatches will kill it. If your ad said this is specifically for agency owners making their first 5K a month and your page says entrepreneurs and business owners, you've just widened the net and weakened your message. So a good example of this is, as I've just said, if your ad said it, they need to say it straight away. They see it there. Next step. When things aren't coherent, your conversions will tank. For example, my top funnel content that gets people onto my page will always reflect and be in line with my main headline title that they see. So for example, they've just seen the one operator, the whole machine. This is the next thing they're gonna see, if not the first thing, and they're seeing the second. Either or, it doesn't matter because it's all coherent. So you don't have a copy problem, you have a system problem. So on my X, YouTube, Instagram, whatever I'm posting content on, it will always be around systems. That's what I will always talk about, systems. When they're clicking from a piece of content, an email, a campaign, they're always going to know that I'm about systems. This is the same thing I implement for my clients. I have some clients who will talk about women's health and then on their page, they're trying to sell a fitness item or they're trying to sell shapewear. It just doesn't align very well and it weakens your message and people won't have as much confidence in you as they could if your message was coherent. The next part of congruency is calling out your ICP. They need to know exactly who the page is for and what it's about. So for example, if you just look at this message right here, you had a copywriter, an editor, a media buyer, and you're paying for every gap in between. I close the gaps, I own the entire machine that turns a cold stranger into a paying customer. This is showing that I basically do everything and I'm calling out their pain point and what they need because, for example, let's say a client I've had, they've had a copywriter and they've had a different marketer. For me, for example, I will do all of that for them so they know they're in the right spot. The next part of congruency is calling out your ICP. Now, this is very important just because when someone clicks on your page, one, they already know they're qualified because your content does that. But secondly, they know that it's for them. And you're calling them out a bit more by showing their pain points. So for example, you're speaking their language. You're talking about them and what they're about. For here, it talks about everything that would happen. So they hired a copywriter, an editor, a media buyer, and they're paying for every gap in between. This means that they're losing a lot of money because they're paying for 7 different things, whereas they could pay one person for all of it and they know everything's gonna work well and streamlined. So now that we've looked at this, I'm going to show you just what's on my page quite quickly. So this is underneath. It's just qualifying the viewer, reader, customer a bit more by showing them, telling them about themselves, stuff we already know and they already know. And then the next step is this, where you go into a bit more detail and you show them what's going wrong and why it's going wrong. So 7 people in 7 lanes and no one owns a result. This is basically showing that things can go wrong at many different points because it's multiple points of contact. We're going to go into a bit more detail when we're going through and calling them out. So for example, what they're doing wrong. So their ad promises one thing and the page delivers another. And then it's just got a bit more context here down below, which talks about what they're doing wrong. Now we're just going to quickly go over congruency as a whole. Congruency makes a visitor feel as if they are in the right place. I'm going to tell you 3 things and it basically puts all of this into a simplified manner. I want you to write these 3 things down. First, the eyebrow text should call out the exact ICP from the ad. Use their language, not yours. The headline should mirror the core promise from the ad or advertorial, not introduce a new one. Then, the ICP, the viewer, the client, whoever's on your page needs to ask themselves, am I in the right place? And they need to be able to answer that within the first 3 seconds. The one mistake I always see with a lot of landing pages is writing the page for everyone. The moment you try to speak to everybody, you're heard by no one. Now, once your viewer knows they're in the right place, the next thing your page has to do is not what most people think. If you want to see the exact structure I use to build and audit landing pages, I've put together a free PDF, which is in the link in the description below. All you have to do is sign up to the email list and it will be emailed directly to you. And that is converting. Now, first things first, and I want you to note this down and keep it in mind. You are not reselling what you've already sold the client. You're converting. Now, what most people do, and this is a mistake I see all the time, they try and resell on the landing page. You don't need to do this. The job of the landing page is to convert the customer. So, for example, let's say you have an email campaign, right? So this is your email campaign. My handwriting shit, but who cares? You're selling here. You are not selling at the landing page. They're already sold on the concept. You don't need to resell them. It breaks the flow of things. So on the landing page, here is where you're converting, right? So I'll just go here, converting. You are not selling because you already did it here. There is no need to do it again. You just need to make them more concrete in their wanting to buy. This is all about conversions. So what I want you to do when it comes to converting is take the motivation that you built previously in the pre-sale and then convert it into action. Most people fail with this because they try to resell the prospect, rebuild the motivation from scratch, and quite often they have no relation. They don't pick up smoothly from the ad page or the email or wherever they're coming from. What ends up happening is that the page that rebuilds from scratch bleeds the warm visitors because you spent money to create again. You didn't need to do this. So now getting more into conversions. If they are on your page, they're already sold on the concept. Now you're handling soft objections. And what this looks like is something like this, where you're basically showing them and understanding the viewer, because people who are on his page and want to buy his product have probably tried this in the past, and this, and this. They've tried all of these things and it's never helped, but his will. And by doing all of this, you're soft objection handling. This isn't hard objection handling. There's 2 types of objection handling that I like to think about it. Other people may think differently. So this is one aspect of it. Now the next aspect is the buyer's motivation was built in the pre-sale. You need to make them act like we mentioned before. So on my page, it looks like this. Why not just hire a copywriter? And then you tell them. So for example, plenty of people will write you an ad, hiring one skill at a time feels cheaper until you add up the cost of the pieces not fitting. I am telling them what they're doing and the pain points they're feeling. And then where's the proof you can do this? And then you just talk about it a bit more. And the purpose of all of this is essentially, it again is soft objection handling, but it's also priming them to buy, because now you've shown them and spoken to them and told them about themselves, and you're telling them how they can make it better. Now the next step is hard objection handling, and this is where you can really cook. So for example, on my page, I took a client from 250k views a month to 4 million views a month within 3 months. And that is a very, very impressive statistic to put. So when that's on my page and someone views this, they are then impressed and be like, wow, okay, so he has results to back this up. He's not just chatting a load of shit, right? And then you do this again. 4x in revenue, I've done this for clients. 3x customer LTV, I've done this for clients. Testimonials are the best form of hard objection handling. This is somewhere where you can take someone who's kind of cold or warm, like on the fence, and get them over the other side and make them pay. So for example, if you can put as many testimonials as possible, that's amazing. And there's a couple ways to implement this. I'll talk about that in another video. So now, going over the core principles of converting. Converting picks up where the pre-sale left off without restarting. There are 3 things I want you to write down for this section. Open with a headline that continues the journey, not just restart it. Mirror the pre-sale mechanism. And what this means is, whatever you spoke about in, for example, your email, your Instagram content, your advertorial, you're also mentioning it on the landing page so the buyer understands and knows that they're in the right place and they're getting ready to buy. The second thing is, your section should answer the next logical question in their head, not re-explain the problem they already know they have. So for example, as you saw on my page, I didn't just talk about things I already spoke about before. I delved into their problem deeper and told them why it's a problem, and each step explained it further and further until they were like, yeah, this guy's goated, I'm gonna buy from him. The third thing I want you to write down is the objection sequence. And this is basically talking about the price, the skepticism about the product, and will it work for the customer? You need to handle them in that order because that's the order they arise. So for example, someone could really enjoy your product, but if it's $1 million, they're gonna be like, whoa, 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 why are you charging me $1 million? So if you can't handle that objection, there's not even point thinking about, is the product good? If the first hurdle is the price. The second thing is skepticism about the product. And that's where you show your results and testimonials. Then the third thing is, will this work for them? And then you show them how it works for them and how it's implemented and what can be done for them. You're selling them the dream, but the dream is achievable and you can deliver those results. We never ever claim anything we cannot deliver on. You undersell and over deliver. Always, 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 because this is how you get happy clients and it's the best way to grow your online business. Now, I'm gonna quickly just go over one mistake I always see, which is when someone adds loads of features. So for example, they add a bunch of features, a bunch of testimonials, thinking it will fix the conversion. More isn't always better. What fixes low conversions is getting the handoff right. And what this means is, your product can be amazing, but if you're not handling objections, the testimonials mean bullshit. For example, let's say you're selling a fitness course. Now, when you're selling a fitness course, it's quite generic and vague. So what people tend to do is they'll have a weight loss fitness course or a muscle building fitness course. And what this essentially allows is for it to be more targeted. Let's say you have a fitness brand and your landing page is just fitness course. You can have 1,000,001 testimonials, but if the buyer doesn't know why they're there, they are not going to buy. So you have to fix that. If you have 1,000,000 testimonials, if the buyer does not know why they're there, they will not buy. It's like going to the shops when you don't have anything in mind. Now, you can have perfect congruence and a smooth handoff, but if the visitor feels like they are taking a risk, they will leave. And this is what principle 3 fixes. And this is making the no feel riskier than the yes. Risk reversal makes the final step feel safe. A guarantee isn't a safety net, it's a reframe. When it's done correctly, the reader should feel like saying no is the more expensive decision. And there's a couple ways you can do this, which I'm going to show you. A great way to think about this is let's say, for example, a phone. Let's just say the iPhone 17 Pro Max. It costs $1,000. But let's say Apple was selling them for $200. You'd be stupid not to buy one, right? Because it's an $1,000 phone for $200. And that's what we're going to be doing, but we're also going to be doing it in a couple different ways. Just a couple of quick things to go over. Most pages use a generic 30-day money-back guarantee as a checkbox at the bottom. They just put it there, standard. They don't put any special effort into it or make it meaningful. It just sits there at the bottom. The pages that convert use the guarantee as a closing argument. When a deal is so good, if you didn't buy it, you'd be stupid. So now going into it, we're first going to look at guarantees. Now, you might ask me, Rayan, aren't guarantees the same as risk reversal? And you're partially right, but there is a bit of a difference. So for example, here's an example of a guarantee. This is just on my page, right? So 1 email a day, unsubscribe in 1 click. If the first issue doesn't give you one idea worth acting on, unsubscribe. One click, no drama. It's there. When you're putting in your name and your email, you are also reading this. Yes, it's at the bottom, but it's not hidden like some people do. And you're also giving a bit more additional info, and it makes them want to actually sign up or buy whatever. So for example, this is just an email list sign up, so the friction isn't as much, but I'm going to show you examples of my client's page where he charges and show you how he does the risk reversal and the guarantees. So now going into risk reversal, this is something I implemented for my client Rafi. So what we did is first we just wrote some stuff down, and the reason why this works is because you're showing what you've accomplished, so they feel like, wow, this person's really amazing. You're more likely to buy something from someone you somewhat look up to or are impressed with. For example, let's just look at some gurus. If someone's just started posting a Lamborghini on their story and they've made $0, you're not going to buy from them. But if they're posting with a Lamborghini and have shown you receipts for $1 million, you're more likely to buy from them. And this is what we're replicating here, but in a different manner. So for example, we're showing the reader how many charts he's decoded, how many countries he's worked with. So for example, people in different countries, because readings are also country specific, and then also the accuracy rate, and then the client rating. So this is what clients have rated him. Then the next way you can do a risk reversal, right? So this is just the card where people will purchase, is 100% money back guarantee, which is standard, if you don't feel 10x the value in clarity. This is a bold claim, but if this just said 100% money back guarantee if you don't feel value in clarity, it doesn't hit as hard as 10 times the value in clarity. Is basically mitigating all the risk possible, because Rafi is saying to his client, if you buy from me, I will give you your money back if you don't feel this massive and immense amount of clarity. It works way better. So for example, if this was just 2x, it's like, oh, okay, so maybe. But 10x is such a high amount that it basically removes all elements of risk from the buyer's brain. The next thing we're going to focus on is talk about what the customer is gaining and not what they are losing. They are going to be spending their money. So you don't want to just say, oh, you get $5,000 worth of value for $500. No, you want to tell them what they're gaining in actual value, not just monetary. So we're going to look at some cards on my page. So let's say, for example, someone wants to work with me, right? They want to learn from me. We talk about what they're gaining. So first, they understand how to read the market, they understand the angles and mechanisms, they understand congruency and how to actually implement it with their funnel and their landing pages, also live teardowns. These are all things that they will be gaining, and they also go into depth. So for example, talk about how to get reviews, how to do forums, ad libraries, a bunch of additional information. So right here, we've mentioned 4 things and then broken them down and spoken about them over here. And what this does is basically showing the client what they will be gaining and how it will benefit them. I'm going to show you another example here, which is when I work with actual brand owners, whether that's info, B2B, e-com, whatever. And we apply the same principles here. So first, we do a teardown and audit of their current funnels, landing page, and everything else. Then we look at their angle, their offer, and copy, and then we rebuild it. So you're already mentioning what they're going to be getting. And then we talk about how it's live, and this is all within 30 days, right? And then ongoing. So for example, we read the numbers, we make sure their revenue's increasing, and then they can contact us at any time. And this is how you show what they're gaining, and this is quite an important thing to implement. Here are 3 things I want you to write down. Lead with what the client keeps, not what they lose. So for example, you could put this on your page. If you're not satisfied, you get a full refund and you keep everything, is way more impactful than, oh, we offer a 30-day guarantee. And then the next thing you do is, and I want you to write down, is you tie the guarantee to a specific result the page promised. So for example, if you do not see X result, we will refund you in full. You need to specify, and when it's specific, it makes it believable. The next thing I want to talk about, value stack. Before you introduce the price, show everything included at full value, then land the offer price. The gap between the perceived value and price is what creates urgency without fake scarcity. And what this essentially means is, for example, let's go back to the fitness page analogy, right? Let's now make it more targeted. Everything's been done correctly, but now on the targeted aspect. As a matter of fact, I'm going to write this down and show you. So This is the landing page. Fat loss, right? There's a landing page, bam. So let's say, for example, before you even mention the price, which will be here, you talk about 30-day plan. Then you talk about weekly calls. Then you talk about one-on-one support. This then creates a lot of excitement for the buyer. For example, they want the 30-day plan, they want the weekly calls, they want the one-on-one support. And when you include all of this, they're already thinking, yeah, I want to get this. This is amazing. I will pay for this. Then you introduce the price. And what that then does is it creates urgency because they're like, yeah, I need this. You have sold them to the point where they want to buy, that they will pay straight away. Now, going back to making the no feel riskier than the yes. One mistake I always see, and this is actually quite important, and I need you to write this down and actually absorb this. A lot of people treat the guarantee as a legal footnote. If the reader has to scroll to the bottom to find it, it's working against you. They need to see it live and direct, right there in front of their face. Otherwise, it can have a negative effect against you if you just hide it somewhere at the bottom, because it makes you seem a bit sneaky. You need to be open and upfront with your clients at all times. Now imagine knowing exactly where your funnel is leaking and why. You're not guessing, you're not changing things at random, knowing. That is what these 3 principles give you. This whole framework here is going to be broken down in even more depth. I'm going to write about everything I've spoken about in this video and upload it as a free PDF for you guys to access. What I showed you today covers the page. Once you run it, you will not just see where the page loses traffic, but where the whole customer acquisition flow breaks down.